Always would. I'm just surprised. I'm just pleased it's working.
It's working really well, actually. I'm pretty happy with it. But I get to see you through it. So I'm
I know.
biased in the best of all possible ways.
It's being sent to a third party. Oh no.
Yes, a mysterious third party.
Indeed. Hello and welcome. I'm in robes and members of the choir in robes because we have to jet out of here for the next service, obviously. So explaining our appearance.
We usually wait a couple minutes.
Okay. I'm on fire time, where it's like, it is 9:30. We are starting. Here we go.
We can warm up.
We can all start warming up. All right. You are now part of the choir. If you weren't already.
I give a dateline to tell where we are and what date it is.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. But following procedure, we'll wait a couple minutes. Very good. Very good. Hannah, would you X out of the little banner on the top, the OK, and then X out of the symbol? Yeah. There we go. And then one more thing, would you hover over that, the view on the right? Or the, like near, sorry, like hover over the picture of Laura. Way. Yeah, and then just the small, the minimize button on the left of it. Just so we can see content on the screen. Perfect. Thank you much. Could I begin? Okay. All right. Well, today is February 16th. It is 9:33 in the morning. We've just had one mass, and we have adult formation now before the next two masses. So, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm Seth. I'm the Director of Music Ministries here at St. Mark, and I'm here to tell you a bit about the organ generally, and specifically about our wonderful instrument that we have here. So if you'll direct your attention to the screen presentation, not all of you are aware, I would guess, that we have a Latin inscription on the top of the instrument. You can see it pretty clearly, but it's also reproduced below. Omne quod spirat laudet Dominum, which is drawn from Psalm 150. All thanks to my predecessor, Charles Snyder, who is responsible for this wonderful instrument. So Psalm 150 is it the shortest psalm? I think it is the shortest psalm, but it's really quite exciting. It's all about instruments and praising the Lord with cymbals and crashing cymbals, and so it's a very important one for musicians. But of course, beyond all the instruments, everything comes back to the human voice. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord. That's what that inscription means. So, of course, the breath that humans have is very special because it was breathed into us by God.
So sorry,
Well,
I'm late.
So we might think of it as something that's special about humans, God's breath, or you might say the breath of the Holy Spirit breathed into humans that when we breathe it back in praise to God, it's deep calling to deep, you might say. So that's a really beautiful inscription there. But what is it doing on not a human voice? Why, it's on an instrument. Well, so a bit of tongue-in-cheek there from Charles, because the organ also has breath. It is a wind instrument, and so it's all every pipe is like a member of the choir singing out, and the organist controls choruses of pipes. That's the whole terminology of an organ, as you'll come to see. A little bit of a delay. Okay, so just briefly, some tidbits about the origins of the organ, and just have a look at that photo on the right there. That's basically a modern organ, in its simplest form. That can be played by one person. It's very similar to an accordion. You could, depending on your dominant hand, you might on the right side there's just a little bellows. You can pump there on the right side. You have a little keyboard, and each key corresponds to a wooden pipe. So in short, that is all an organ is. But obviously, the church organ gets to be a much larger instrument, much louder, and something with many hundreds of pipes at least. So there are some classical origins for something that's kind of like an organ, that is wind powered, is made for large groups of people. Some are also like water powered too, so it uses water pressure to create
chairs and Winartha.
Thank you. So it uses water pressure to create air pressure, which is pumped through some pipes, and this is especially used in very large gatherings, sometimes in like a coliseum or a large theater. So in the classical world, the associations are largely pagan or secular, and so that's obviously not something ancient Christians would have any interest in being a part of. Indeed, any instrument at all, early Christians were very suspicious of having instruments in worship, in their communal gatherings, in part because the associations were with the pagan, were with the secular, were not with worship of the true God. And throughout, please raise your hand if you have any questions. I'm going to be kind of jumping all over, so if you want to know more about something, I'm happy to get into that. So when we get to something that really jumps forward, so that again, these classical instruments that we see that have a relationship, that are kind of organ-like, do not have a direct relationship in terms of their technology or their associations with the organ we have today. That comes from medieval Europe. One difficulty is we can't put a good date on when you get basically an organ as we know it in the church, because in the early writings about vocal music and instrumental music are fundamentally indistinguishable. And you'll see that. I'll have a quote up here in a bit. I do want to point out, especially as you're thinking about where does the organ show up? It shows up in the Western Church, not the Eastern Church. Two major churches, what comes to be Catholic, what comes to be called Orthodox. And you see in these far parts of the old Roman Empire, in what becomes like Western Europe, Northern Europe, these sort of wild experimentations outside of the norms of historic Christian worship. And so in that way, so doing things like bringing in instruments, yes.
Well, the descriptions, what would be an example of a description, like alto, soprano, and loud, soft?
Yeah. Also, one of the problems is the word organo or organa, both of which can refer to an organ, an instrument, or can refer to multiple voices singing in polyphony.
Thank you.
And so it becomes very confusing. Are they singing? Is there an instrument in the room? Don't know. So anyway, as I was talking about in these far reaches of the old empire, adding in instruments to worship is honestly a kind of secularization, that's a hard word to say, of in Western Europe. And obviously you don't see that happening in the Orthodox tradition to this day. Ask them how they go to an Orthodox church and ask them how they feel about instruments in worship. They'll use instruments outside of worship in their gatherings, but in worship, no, that's something secular, not for worship. It's rather impure. So I think that's just an interesting way, since those of us who grew up in the West see organ as something so very traditional. From a historic Christian perspective, it's not. Kind of funny point to bring up. Okay, so here's a quote I want to bring, and this is from about circa 1000, the description of the dedication of an Anglo-Saxon monastery church. And it says, when the solemn, jubilant responsory was completed, praise upon praise and hymn upon hymn had been chosen, whereupon the master of the organa ascended with the crowd of the people to the upper floor, where with thundering sound he stirred up the souls of the faithful to praise the name of the Lord. The joyful choir, hearing this with obliging ears, for Christ, who is the glory of the holy angels, applied themselves to solemnity, singing sweet praises lustily in alternation. When the right hand part of the choir sang out the melody with glorious voices, then the left jubilantly exerted themselves in organic praises. And so I've basically left two words untranslated from the Latin, organa and organic, to point out, again, this linguistic problem we have in medieval writing. So the first mention, the master of the organa, this could be referring to a master of the choir, of a polyphonic choir, or it could be referring to the master of the organ, the instrument. I've put in bold the thundering sound, which suggests very probably that this is a master of a pipe organ. He may also be the master of the organa, the choir, but probably the thundering sound makes us think, yeah, this is probably someone playing an organ that's making thundering sound. But I've left, obviously, at the tail end of this quote, we have a choir singing in alternation, antiphony, singing at each other, and they're singing in organic praises. So that is, again, using the same root word, but that is talking about some kind of early polyphonic music, rather than they're not singing each of them are not using an instrument, a small organ or something like that. It wouldn't make any sense. Okay, we're going to jump ahead at least 500 years, if not more. Just jump. Oh, wow! They all the points jumped up before you're supposed to see them. So no cheating, no spoilers. On the right, that's at the Bach. The photo there is from the Bachkirche, the Bach Church in Arnstadt, and so obviously, that we'll get to Lutheranism just a bit here. So the rise of Protestantism, different reformations across Europe. You see a fundamental change in, well, a lot of things in worship change. But as we think about the organ, the role of the organ changes. So Protestantism fundamentally democratizes parts of church life, of worship, of sacraments, engaging with the scriptures, all kinds of things. And it also changes who is doing music in some places. So let's take the Lutherans. One of two, I would say, relatively moderate Reformation movements, Lutheran and Anglican, two moderate, the rest of them pretty radical. At times, Lutherans and Anglicans get radical, but we'll call them moderate because they keep sacraments, things like that. So we talk about the democratizing of church worship. The Lutherans, they're using organ and expecting the congregation to sing. This is entirely normal for us. We think about the role of the organ, like, oh, maybe the organist plays something before or after the service. But fundamentally, the organ is for the congregation. It's to support the voice of the congregation. Oh, it's a wildly new idea about the use of the organ and the role of the congregation in Christian worship. Again, this is early modernity here, and new expectations about people, Enlightenment ideas about the individual, and and education is rising. Yes,
I'm sorry, you took a blabbermouth.
no.
Then would the congregation have been singing those old German hymns that we have in our hymnal?
Yeah, yes,
Wow.
this is when
And then
those hymns are being written.
when
Those
the Wesleys came along, it wasn't until the 19th century, and that's why they're so.
Yeah, 18th century is when we get Charles and John Wesley.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, yes, again, so Lutherans are having hymns for the first time that a congregation would sing, that not just a choir and clergy. So a very different role. We think about pre-Protestant use of the organ. It's for processions, definitely. It's to create some of that spectacle. It's this mechanical marvel. Again, having a mechanical marvel in the church it seems very Western. Again, that's the Eastern church, how they feel about mechanical wonders in church. Oh, that sounds way too technological, way too modern, way too, that doesn't sound very holy. Again, this is something about the way we live and understand things as mostly Westerners. So Lutherans and there's some other Eastern Protestants that, sort of bring on this idea of congregational singing and the organ being a part of that. Radical Protestants, this is the second large point you'll see there, reject the organ. This includes Puritans during the Commonwealth era, so the time when England was not Anglican, when it briefly was not under the monarchy. Well, we saw a radical turn in the Church of England. Protestants, Puritans, Protestants, kind of the same, took over, and so they banned the prayer book, banned the use of organs, melted some down, dismissed all the choirs, and again, that is a return to a more quote pure kind of worship again, and whether they realized it or not, it was like historically correct in terms of pure Christian worship. How you deal with that, make of it what you will.
Like if it didn't hurt, it wasn't okay, right? It wasn't painful, it wasn't awful, or something.
Oh, well,
Like the more beauty that was brought in, the more suspect the worship was. Is that kind of a?
yeah, well, okay, but in part we have that the New Testament does not mention any instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not, you have this more extreme Protestant idea that if you're not told to do it,
Okay.
don't do it. Lutheran, moderate, says, okay, we're not told not to do it. The New Testament never says, don't use instruments in worship. Like, well, we should use instruments in worship. It's a more positive view of God's creation. Like, God made the world, God made music, God made inventive humans who can make marvelous machines, and we can have marvelous machines in the church, and it's not against God's word to do this, so let's do it. So that's an example of a moderate position, whereas Anabaptists at the time would say, well, the scripture, we must only do the things that scripture says. Anything else, if we're not told to, don't do it.
When I grew up as a Lutheran in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
When we build a new church, they send a committee to Europe to shop for the organ. And then they picked one out, very expensive. And then they came back and told the architect, build the church around this organ. And the church prior to that one, hundreds of years old, they'd done the same thing. And the philosophy was singing is twice praying. And that's how important music was.
Right. So we have
in the Lutheran Church.
Right. We have this ancient Christian quote about singing is twice praying, but not singing with instruments. So this Lutheran thing that is this unique idea in all of Christendom, that you get to a denomination, a group of Christians that are so pro music, and that's why, let's keep moving. We see this huge flourishing of liturgical music of all kinds, instrumental, vocal, orchestral, in 17th, 18th century in the Lutheran vein. And so if I'm playing German music, which I often am upstairs, there's a good chance it's going to be Lutheran 17th, 18th century. And the other groups of Christians are not doing that at the time, and certainly not with congregational singing. Just so you know that congregational singing does not become, the congregational singing of hymns, let me be clear, does not become allowed in the Church of England until the 19th century. So again, just to challenge some of your ideas of what is traditional, even within Anglicanism, not just like church worship, church history, just if we want to be traditional Anglicans, no, hymns aren't in the prayer book. There's a reason the prayer book doesn't give much at all in terms of nods to music. So you have this whole like sort of separate royal and collegiate tradition that invents and builds up next to the prayer book. But anyhow, yeah, so the hymn singing, not a very traditional thing for Anglicans. Lutherans, and then we get Methodists bringing it in, really, as Jean. Okay, I should keep moving because time is a passing. Okay, let's get to an organ technical description. I love this little print. It's from a French organ builder. In one of my classes in college, we read a description, basically a job description for a Lutheran organist, and the expectation was that the organist's wife would pump the billows. Yeah. Anyway, so we can see this sort of medium-sized instrument here. You have the organist on the right. Can you see my cursor? No. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The organist on the right, there are pipes behind the organist, or pipes above, and then inside the organ, there's someone pumping billows. You can do that with hands. Some types of billows you do with your feet. You stand on a bunch of things. Sometimes with much larger instruments, the billows, traditionally billows boy, would need the sheet music in front of them to know when a lot more air is going to be required. Like, oh, not just the sheet music, mind you, but the registrations that the organist is going to use. I may be using unfamiliar terms, but because at different parts in the music, the organist is going to suddenly need a lot more air. Okay, I'm going to have to pump a lot here, and not so much another point. Okay, here is a bit more of a beautiful diagram that I've kind of created for you. So let's look on the right-hand side. The manuals, those are keyboards. Ours has 2 manuals, and then the pedal, that's a keyboard for the feet. So you can see there's kind of a lever there, and that goes along something called trackers. And so here, I'm going to pass these around. These are trackers from our organ. And I want you to feel how thin and light these are. Very easily breakable. You don't break them, but you could very easily. And this it's kind of astounding how like that all the sound is all the action is carried along these things. So you'll have trackers that go to both keyboards and the pedal, or you may have even more keyboards. Then there's the stop knob. That is another, can be mechanical. On our instrument, it actually is electric. But again, that's going to move something called a slider underneath the wing chest, actually above it, which is going to allow the organist to select what rank of pipe, what set of pipes. So you can see kind of, this is an imaginary 3-rank organ where you have some kind of a reed, some kind of a flute in the middle, and some kind of principal on the right. And so in this imaginary organ, you'd have 3 stops. And
Jane used it to stir her coffee.
Oh, good, very yeah. And then we can see on the right, the wind is provided by a blower with motor or bellows, either way. And then there's a reservoir, which is so containing more air in case more is required in a moment.
Quick question.
Yes, please.
Where you marked it, trackers on the horizontal?
Yep.
Is that also a tracker connected to it on the vertical?
Correct.
So,
Yes.
So how do those things not snap? So that's one tracker pushing another tracker.
Yeah. So here's a connector. So you have different kinds of connectors to transfer like horizontal to vertical movement, things like that. But they hold up. they hold it, you'd have to bend it the other way to snap it, but I mean, sometimes when you're working in there, you just snap them. It's a rite of passage, you snap one and you break one. You replace it.
Okay.
But yeah, so depending where the chest of the organ is compared with the manuals, you're gonna have a whole set of trackers transferring action, transferring action, transferring
So
action.
if you snap one, can you replace it, or do you have to call somebody in to do that?
I could, I don't.
Okay.
So when I've been at churches where it's a kind of a not nice organ, I'll just do it. This is a very nice organ, so there are things in a pinch I can do, but I'll leave it to the people who are actually professionals to do any real work inside our instrument. So keep moving. Oh my goodness, time, how it flies. Okay. Inside our organ. This is an old photo from the post 91 build. Our organ is built by Walker, which is a British organ builder. So this instrument was built in England, and they would have built the entire organ, set it up, made sure it worked in the workshop, then deconstructed it into the parts, shipped it off here, rebuilt it here. So our organ has three divisions, three like very separate parts of the organ. They each correspond to a manual. So one keyboard corresponds to this is the grate, another corresponds to the swell organ, and another corresponds to the pedal keyboard, the thing I play with my feet. Keep moving.
Yeah.
So there's the post 91 build. You can see, do you see the like empty board on the top and bottom? Yeah, that is where space was left on the wind chest to add more because there wasn't enough money at the time to quote complete the instrument. Here's a photo I took the other day, filled in. So you can see those are we have a trumpet, a hooded trumpet on the bottom there, and then we have a flute, a partially more of it somewhere actually in the front there. So 39 ranks, that means 38 ranks, that means 38 different types of pipes, and each of those span the whole full compass of the keyboard, coming to 1,987 pipes, plus a Zimbelstern. This is not a large organ. This is a small to medium sized instrument. It's very nice. Just so you get an idea, here it's a very small list of types of pipes. If you wanted an exhaustive list of pipes, you needed like a tome. I'm gonna pass these around. You can touch these. We don't touch the pipes that are in the organ, but we've got here, both of these, believe it or not, are flutes. One is made of metal and one's made of wood. Fundamentally, they're big whistles, or small whistles. Some are smaller than whistles. Then, yeah, I wouldn't blow into that because the foot there is lead. Why we don't blow into them, sir? But yeah, it works. Oh, you did, good. Yeah, put the hand over it, and then there you got it. So we've got a whole variety and near endless variation based on region, historical area, material composition, voicing. The room is endless. Moving on.
It's cool that when we call the crumb horn, because when we sing come for be my people.
Yes.
I always think it sounds like early music, we should have a crumb horn.
Exactly. I wish.
And we've got one.
Well, yeah, we have something close to it. We have a Cremona, but it's very romantic. And hey, it's me inside the organ. It is hard to get. It is hard to get photos of the swell division. Do you see there are something kind of like shutters behind my face?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the swell organ, the part that makes it a swell, we have something very much like Venetian blinds that are moved mechanically by my right foot to close and open. Roll, tell us open. And so anytime you hear, so when the organ's getting louder, when I'm playing it, it's either I'm adding stops or I'm opening these shutters. And so you can get, the sound will swell. So that's called the swell organ. Okay, and then briefly, here is a couple of photos of the pedal division. Yeah, okay, shocking. I just wanted to let you know, this is for anyone who knows organ, if they look at the spec list, these things in the middle. This looks ridiculous. On 32, that means a 32-foot pipe in theory. 32, 16, 16, 16. We have a smallish organ. That sounds ridiculous. When I looked at this organ online, I was like, what on earth did they do? I am so grateful, Charles, who put together with help the specs of this instrument was trying to, like, how can I get something that sounds almost like an English cathedral organ in our little space here. It's by getting these huge low tones, and from the organ building tradition, mainstream tradition, especially in the States, like, you do not put this looks unbalanced. It really works. On the top, you says DG, 2 digital stops in our organ. We pride ourselves on, having a mechanical instrument, and then, there are 2 digital stops. So there wasn't room, and also we wouldn't have money to put in a 32-foot contract organ. Woo! Wild.
So it's synthesized? sound?
Yeah, there are a couple speakers in the back of the pedal. Yeah, I use those sparingly when I have like guest organists here and I hear them like pulling the digital stops. Like, oh, it's so balanced. Okay. Just here's some photos from the installation of our wonderful instrument. Those are on the left, those are like laid out in the music room downstairs. On the right, you can see those are hooded trumpets that were added in 2015 to our instrument. Tuning flues, 2 types of pipes, basically. You have flues and reeds. Flues are like these, and both of these are flues. And so you can see there's arrows denoting how you can move up and down to create sharper flat. Yeah. Both of these are stopped flutes. These are completely covered on the top. So that means you can do something very efficient, because when the sound enters the resonating chamber, the sound wave will double back on itself because it stopped, thus creating a pitch twice the length. Normally, to create this pitch, I need twice the length of pipe. You put a stop on it, you get a pitch twice the length. Saves a lot of material. It also creates a different type of timbre, a different timbre. On the right, you can see there's a mechanism to change how much air is coming into the pipe. It varies drastically depending on the type. Okay, here's a reed. Didn't bring out a reed for you, but tone is created very differently, not like a whistle. It's a reed. There's a tongue there that's usually made out of brass. So it vibrates is very much like the construction of a clarinet. Yeah, single reed, not double. So
Do the reeds have to be changed? Like, if you play a reed instrument, you get new reeds.
The brass
right?
holds up pretty well. Yeah, sometimes they have to be cleaned and reset, and sometimes they lose their curvature or lack thereof. They should have a tiny bit, so they have to be reset. But the brass holds up really well. You can see there's a tuning slide on the left there. That's a picture from our organ, and that allows me to allows the tuner to manipulate how much of the tongue is going to vibrate. Good. Lots of other different ways to manipulate the sound after the organ installation.
does it have to be tuned?
We tune ours twice a year. It's getting parts of the organ are kind of gnarly right now. We'll get it tuned before the Passion, before Holy Week. Here's a glance under the organ, the lower level, just so you know what you're looking at. Again, blower on the bottom right, little motor in there with lots of insulation around it, lots of sound dampening things so you don't hear the motor going. There's a reservoir. There are big weights on there to keep some downward pressure on that pressurized air. Swell trackers, you can see that transfers the action on the manual on the keyboard into. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going because I want you to actually get upstairs and notice some time. Okay, last thing to talk about is lots of different ways to transfer action into an instrument. On the left, that is one of the rooms, one of the practice organs where I did my master's degree, Southern Methodist University. There's actually two organs you can see in that room. The larger one, I should like no interest in making like a beautiful case, just like lay out. This is a very modern organ. Lay out all the ranks of pipes. And do you see the white cord sort of coming out of the console? That's just a bunch of electrical cables. So that instrument, you push a key, it's a switch, it's an electrical switch. That switch causes the keyhole to open. There's a whole other set of action, magnets and leather and things to make that happen. You have you can make really interesting configurations if you use like an electric or electro-pneumatic configuration. It's not a great playing experience. You lose a lot. On the right, from one of our greatest churches in our denomination, that's St. Thomas Fifth Avenue in New York. And we have a choir school that sadly is declining. That is a wonderful mechanical instrument they have in the back, and you can see where the console is in relation to the pipes. Very easy to build that action. Two more examples, two local examples. On the left, we have Wheaton College's Edmund Chapel, which is a terrible place for music, turns out. There's a giant organ in there, nearly 3 times the size of ours. It has 2 consoles. So right beneath the pipes and alongside the pipes, you have a 3-manual tracker, mostly tracker. There's a bit of electric going on there. And then down beside the stage, you have a 4-manual electric console but it's used to play the same instrument. So 2 ways you can do it. You can also have players at both and just like kind of choose, okay, I'm going to play these divisions, don't touch them. I'm going to play these. So you can do like a double organ. Faith Lutheran, Glen Ellen, our partners and friends just down the road. They have an instrument that is tried to replicate a Baroque Netherlands organ, and it has, so it's incredibly specific. It's beautiful, but you're kind of trapped only doing music from North Germany, Netherlands, in the 17th, 18th century, and doesn't work too well for if you want to do anything else. Okay, we have a tiny bit of time. We're gonna go upstairs if you're able to join me.
Can I ask you to stop sharing so that we can watch? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
That signal.
Oh, that's not what I meant. I'm sorry. Okay.